Couch Conversations.
Episode 2.
We are back.
We're back.
We are back with Dalton the dog for another conversation around women's health.
Yeah. It's been a week, and I think it's a week of speaking your truth, even if it's hard.
Especially when it's hard.
Especially when it's hard. Mm-hmm. Tough conversations. We both had a theme this week of Western medicine and healthcare, and not being incentivized to get to the root cause.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Do you want to talk about your blog?
Maybe we talk about
my post?
Your post. The
post. Yes. Yes. I posted something on Instagram last night on our company page, and I sent it to Julie first and just said, this is a little controversial. What do you think about posting this? And she was like, it's an important conversation. I think we need to be talking about it. And just going back to, even if something is hard to hear, that doesn't make it not true. And that very much applies in this situation. Yeah. So the post, we were talking about IVF and how there is nothing inherently wrong with IVF. And it only solves one problem with women in pregnancy, that it potentially allows them to get pregnant. But what it doesn't solve for is really investigating at a root cause level why a woman was having difficulty getting pregnant in the first place.
Right.
And when we think about some of the root causes that prevent pregnancy, IVF can bypass those because we're altering a woman's cycle with hormones. But potentially by bypassing that, things can potentially be passed on to children through generations. And sometimes these things we don't see really in children until their teenage years. So yes, I think that IVF has helped a lot of women and new children being born into this world. We're in a really different time with reproduction and IVF. What used to be IVF was so rare, and now it's really far more common. And we have to ask why.
At a certain age, I would say even starting at 35, 40, it's the go-to for doctors. Right? Oh, you're trying, they don't even give you a chance to try naturally. Yeah. It's, let's go talk to the team for IVF.
Yep.
Let's go try to get you to do this. It's going to be so much better and easier, without even talking about what the repercussions are, what you're going to go through for however long, and the cost for it, like the physical, emotional, financial cost all associated with it.
Yeah.
But then it brought up a bigger question too of, in general, Western medicine and doctors aren't incentivized to get to the root cause of anything. So we were even talking about how it's gated, like even getting advanced lab test, biomarker test is gated by your doctor. They can't or won't order these types of things. The entire system is kind of set up. I wrote the blog about this. The whole system is set up to just get you in and out with a diagnosis and a prescription for something else. So if you present with, an imbalance cycle, go on the pill. If you present with any sort of cramps or pain or heavy periods, go on the pill. Whatever it is, acne, go on the pill. If you're depressed or anxious, go on a pill, right? Whatever, it's just like a prescription and go, and it's a pill, and that's what it is. And there's never, there's very rarely a conversation about why are these things happening in the first place. Mm-hmm. And even for me, with stuff that I was going through, it's like, oh, I'm anxious. Well, yeah, I am anxious because I'm going through all these other issues. The anxiety isn't just coming from nothing. It's coming because I'm having a lot of confusion, and their doctors are just really not incentivized to do it. They need an insurance code. They need to be able to bill for lab work. Mm-hmm. And you and I have been talking about that. I think we have to just really, it's hard to get this stuff. Mm-hmm. You can't just really go into your doctor. There are exceptions to the rule, but in general, you can't go into your doctor and say, I want all my female hormone panels, I want complete blood count, I want thyroid, you have to present with an issue first.
Yeah.
And the problem is sometimes you don't present with issue, like symptoms of an issue, until it's already pretty advanced. The condition's advanced.
Yeah, of course. I went in for, I remember this was a few months ago, a test that I couldn't order for myself. I was like, you know what, let me just go in. It was like proactive testing. And they were like, well, are you experiencing symptoms? And I said, no, this is just proactive. It's something I just wanted to do ahead of time. And they said, oh, well, I can't unless you're experiencing symptoms. And it's just so funny. But yeah, our medical paradigm, it just isn't set up. It's a system. It's a system approach, especially and really when doctors are taking insurance. And we know the insurance
if they're
model,
outside of the insurance industry,
it's a different situation.
It is a different situation.
Yeah, of course.
And but then you're paying for it, right?
You're paying either way.
You're going to pay either way. And so actually that is a beautiful thing. We've heard Dr. Mark Hyman say this. It's you pay the farmer or the pharmacist.
Yeah.
Right. But in life, it's either proactive and you put your attention, your care, your money there, or it's going to come down the line.
Yeah.
For me, my surgeries, I had 2 myomectomy surgeries, and they cost me $50,000 between the surgeries, and my insurance wasn't great. I had to pay out of pocket for a bunch of stuff. I was fighting insurance to not have a hysterectomy. They would have paid for that 100%. But to avoid that, I had to pay extra. And then I lost tons of time for work. So had I, years prior gotten advanced lab testing and paid for it on my own, it would have been significantly less than that. And I wouldn't have suffered for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And nobody suggested that, like no doctor. And I didn't know at that point that you could actually do that you could go and you could order your own stuff. I think I knew to a certain degree a little bit, but not for the whole thing. And people weren't really talking about it. And I didn't really know where to go or who to talk to. Mm-hmm. But if you go to a doctor and you ask for this, they can't really, if they need an insurance code. And some of the stuff for like perimenopause doesn't necessarily have a condition associated with it.
Right.
So there is no code. What are you going to test for?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, besides hormone levels, which only tell a fraction of the story.
Yeah.
Often not. With sex hormones, I mean, and especially in perimenopause and even in IVF cycles, they look at sex hormones, and that sex hormones they're pretty reactionary to everything else going on in the body. So whenever I'm thinking about root causes, sex hormone levels are not even remotely on my list.
Right.
So for something like perimenopause, for something like infertility, you got to be looking at everything else.
Yeah.
That's going to cause
thyroid levels. Thyroid
levels, but even thyroid's reactionary.
Yep,
so looking at toxicants, nutrient deficiencies, blood sugar imbalances, it's your hormones react to the environment of your body. And so sometimes I'll get, when I had a private practice, sometimes their doctors would run their hormone labs and then they'd come back and I'd be like, well, this tells us something. It doesn't tell us much, unfortunately. But yeah, it's a really hard system to be a part of. And if you are going to go the insurance-based route, you can expect minimal lab testing from your physicians. Those labs probably are only going to show when things are significantly imbalanced.
Right.
Rather than
which
trends.
Means you're at that point, you might have to have prescription or a surgery.
Right.
And that's the saddest part of all. It's like if you can actually get that proactive, preventative, advanced lab work paid for by an insurance company, it would save everybody. I mean, it costs employers, it costs you, it costs your time with your family, it's your life, it's your quality of life, so many things.
Yeah.
And I kind of equate this to almost like, do you remember like how expensive really big screen TVs were like 10 years ago? And it was just like out of control and really expensive for most people. And now it's really, a couple $100 at Best Buy.
Yeah.
And lab work, I think, is going to go down that path. Like right now, if you do, and there are ways to do it. You can go direct to consumer. You can try to concoct. I mean, in theory, you could go and just figure out, what other companies are doing and try to get it all yourself. You're going to pay a lot for it because you're not going to have a volume deal. You're not going to have some provider deal. It's going to be hard to get. It's going to probably be a little bit confusing, but it's not impossible. Anybody can do it, right? Mm-hmm. It's not rocket science. You can put it together. Most states allow you to do it, and you're going to eat it with the cost. And then you're going to get these results back, and a lot of doctors won't even look at them. They won't even interpret them for you. So now you're on your own with Dr. Google.
Oh yeah,
And
never a good sign.
I would not recommend that. But the system isn't really set up for you to even try to go and do this for yourself and get the answers and take it into control. You can though. But the reason companies like ours exist, and other companies that are out there now too that we've tried and used, and I'm so happy that there's more, because it will only eventually it will bring the cost down. Mm-hmm. The more people are asking for this, the more people are saying, I need this, I want this. And we were even talking about it today, you know, the cost of the test and how, you know, making it more palatable to people. But ultimately, you also really want the answers. Mm-hmm. What do I do with this information?
Yeah, of course. I mean, even on the lab panels that I used to run through my private practice, I would have people say, like, can you give me the list and I'll ask my physician if they can run it so I can get it covered by insurance. Yeah. And I'd say, okay, like, let's play the game. Let's see how much they're willing to run, because I already knew the answer. And they'd come back and they'd say, well, they're going to run a few things, but they said this list was ridiculous. And I was like, all right, like, what on there, what markers specifically were they like having a hard time with? And just like a couple examples, looking at a homocysteine marker, it's ideally that number should be below 7. It's more of an inflammation marker. It tells you a lot about your methylation abilities. Right. It can tell you about brain inflammation. It can tell you about potentially sleep apnea. I've seen it with mold exposure. Really, really big, cool marker.
Yeah.
And
for longevity too.
Especially for longevity.
Like aging, how well you age.
Yes. So, and just doctors.
Among other things.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Wouldn't run it. Or like reverse T3. Another big inflammation marker. If that number is high, typically the thyroid is struggling and it's producing more of an inactive form of thyroid hormone. I've never seen it run by any physician. Yeah. And so it's these things that, yes, you can do it on your own. Yes, you can piece this together. But there are people out there who are looking at labs and who understand how to read between the lines, because this is what we've been taught to do.
Right.
And it's a beautiful thing when you can look at someone's labs and it's like a puzzle. It's actually my favorite thing ever. It's so fun to do.
Let's talk about how one of the ways we met is we had talked about how I had my AI written report from one place. But the other thing that was very distressing is I work out and my cholesterol was high. Mm-hmm. I felt like my diet was really good and Mediterranean diet, a lot of pescatarian. And I had high cholesterol and a couple of heart markers that were alarming. Mm-hmm. And so my AI report from another place was like, work out more and eat wild boar and all this. And I was like, oh no, I don't know. Your interpretation of it was, and I know we talked about this before, but it's so important to just reiterate from a functional medicine perspective and even traditional Chinese medicine. You were like, wait a minute, let me get to what is your sleep cycle? What are your relationships? Where's your stressors? And looking at the whole big picture, not just this one thing independently.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was so interesting. And then the one change that I made was to not fast. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit more on the omega-3, which can also affect your heart markers. But yeah, the one thing was to not stress out my heart from these 16, 17 hours a day of fasting. And that's what made the difference. And in 3 months, all my markers. But so it's not just the markers. Yeah. You have to know how to interpret them, and you have to really see it from a very holistic perspective. Yeah. An integrated perspective.
Yeah, of course. I think, and we spoke a little bit about this on Couch Conversation episode 1. But also thinking about like the specialization of Western medicine, that we tend to look at everything, like we hyper zoom in and we hyper fixate on this one system, this one lab marker, this one thing, and as if it doesn't exist in relationship to everything else. And we do the same thing with labs. You know, it's like, oh, this one marker is off, like A plus B equals C. And, you know, you have anxiety, get prescribed an SSRI, anxiety goes away. And that's not how the body works. Right. And it's the same with looking at labs, you know.
Right.
I see a marker and I'm like, cool, okay. I make notes, like potential possibilities, but it tells a story. It tells the story of your health and the story of your life. And then when we have all the markers lined up in context with how you're living your life, your relationships, your attachment style, your sleep, your dreams, your goals, your belief system. Now I have a whole novel about you.
Right.
Now I know.
I
Okay.
like that.
It's kind of beautiful.
It's pretty.
A lab review is really just like looking at the story of who you are in the snapshot of time, which is so beautiful. And your lifestyle tells me everything that you believe about yourself and the way you grew up and the things that you were taught. And that's a really beautiful story. And when we combine them both, it's a really powerful thing. And not a whole lot of people are doing that. So this is really where the individual
I would
approach
say
is.
I don't think anybody's really doing that yet. And I do think in the future there will be, and I'm happy about that. It's good. I think medicine needs to change, healthcare needs to change to be more proactive and to be more about everything, the mind-body connection.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. In fact, to even the fertility conversation or the IVF, it's really truly understanding what is happening here, because it could even be relationship patterns. It could be, that gets into another whole thing too, is why is the body protecting you or blocking you or what's happening?
Yeah.
And people don't really want to talk about all of that, but there's always an underlying root cause for everything that's happening. The body tells you.
Yeah.
One way or another.
Course. And if you zoom out enough, if we stop taking this like hyper focused in and we have more perspective, we have more context, we look at the past more, we understand the future implications more, then you can make a truly informed choice. With medications, there are nutrient deficiencies that come with birth control, with SSRIs, with lots of medications have many nutrient deficiencies. We don't think about that when we prescribe that there are consequences to those things.
Any prescription and any surgery has side effects.
Of course.
And we're often not told that. It's like quick fix. We are in a very quick fix type of thing. Yeah. And we've even had conversations with people who are like, I don't want to see my biomarkers. You're going to see it one way or another. And it could be 5 years from now when we can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Except for prescription surgery or who knows, right?
I know. So people get so scared.
It's so, but it feels so scary. I remember taking 23andMe years and years ago, and it's it was like, are you sure you want the results? Or, remember that? It's like, you had to sign this form basically. Yeah. And it was warning, if you click this thing, you're going to know whether or not you have, you're predisposed to Parkinson's or something. It's like, I don't know if I want to know that.
Yeah.
But I personally believe information is power. Mm-hmm. And the more that I understand, especially about epigenetic change, that your lifestyle has so much of an influence on what happens with you and your body. We have genetic traits that will predispose us to certain things, but we can affect so much of it and live better lives with change with our lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that's what, I believe. And I've personally been able to do it with so many things that were markers with my own family.
Yeah.
And that should have showed up by now and haven't.
Right.
And I don't think will, because of the way I live my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I understand the nervousness around, I actually really used to be that way. I get really scared about like lab results. And I was like, oh my gosh. But now once you I do think to some extent, emotionally, it's a disconnection from the body. And there's a lot of fear and hesitation about acknowledging what currently is, because it's a harsh truth to face. I mean, speaking of harsh truths for this week, it's a harsh truth to face. If there's a lot of resistance to coming up there, typically there's subconscious understanding that maybe we're not showing up for our bodies as much as we could be. Maybe we're not showing ourselves enough self-love as we could be. Maybe there is a disconnect there, and lab work is pretty black and white. So it'll tell you, labs don't lie, as we like to say.
Yeah, labs don't lie.
It will tell you in real time, what
the harsh truth.
The harsh truth.
Well, and I think the key thing here is, and this also was coming up this week as a theme, is you can do something about it.
Of course.
You can know that there is, potentially, I don't know, some weird energy, or you're going into a situation that might be difficult. But if you know that in advance, you're prepared. You can prepare yourself.
Of course.
So if I know in advance that, I have heart disease in my family, and I've got this and this, and I've got thyroid problems, all the stuff, I can know that there are certain ways to live my life, certain diets, reducing my stress, making sure that I am not inflamed, removing toxins, all of these things that I knew and were practicing, even though I didn't really realize I was doing it for these reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just to try to stay healthy. And then if I look and I run my labs and I can see the progress. So that for me, it's like that was important. And actually that we didn't really talk about this, like why did we change the prices for our brand new startup?
Yeah.
The protocol, the foundation protocol, because even for what we needed 2 rounds of tests.
Yeah.
Going to take it once and then 6 months later, take it again after you've been making lifestyle changes and seeing that epigenetic change. And it's really satisfying to know that you're making the change and keeping yourself accountable to say, I'm going to retest in 5 months, so it better look good.
Yeah.
For me, when I was retesting, I did March and then early June, which was pretty early for 2. But I mean, really, it wasn't enough time to technically change, but it did. And we talked about this in episode 1 as well.
Yeah.
It was so satisfying.
Of course.
It really felt like an achievement. And I was able to. You are able to. I mean, I guess we could go into it. It's like, even if you do have a condition or a disease or a chronic illness, you can make changes to feel better.
Yeah, I encourage anyone who's in that space to really rethink what's possible. What do you believe about the condition that you have? Do you believe that this is something that you're going to have forever? Do you believe that it's something that's only solvable by medications? Do you believe that lifestyle couldn't possibly influence it? As we've mentioned before in this episode, the Western medical paradigm is one paradigm. There are so many different and really beautiful ways about looking at health and the body, and so many things that we can try and experiment with. And I do understand that some conditions are to the point that there is no return. Potentially. I don't even know if I believe that anymore.
Well, even as you're saying, I'm like, do you really believe that?
I don't think I do.
But even if you can still improve the quality of life that you do have, and I believe that. I really believe that.
So much is possible.
But if you're a genuinely healthy person, and this is the thing too, is I thought that I can tell you that I was shocked to have those heart biomarkers.
Yep.
It was shocking because for me, especially after healing after my surgeries and being like resolved to never have that happen again and changing my diet and working out every day, and I'm like, how the heck could this show up?
Yep.
And well, but then it made a lot of sense. I had just moved back to Boston. It was freezing cold and pasta. I didn't know that I had problems with gluten, so that had showed up in a biomarker because I didn't test it. It's interesting. I think I knew and I refused to test. So I had a little bit of that cognitive
the
bias,
harsh truth.
Right?
You don't want to know.
I didn't want to know. So I didn't do the test. And then I did the test and I was like, oh, I have it. And so then the whole winter was gluten. And no wonder my heart was like, I don't know what's happening here right now. So, but what interestingly enough, I had already changed that a little bit because I had sort of figured it out and the weather was changing. And then that's when you were like, I don't think it's the diet thing really.
Yeah.
And it was more the fasting thing.
Yeah.
The other thing is too, like you're never going to be perfect. So I think we can go into that a little bit. There are so many people out there who have, never any cookie, never pasta, never have a glass of wine. And I personally believe, and I know what the longevity movement says on this, is it's no for all that. But I think that being happy and balance and enjoying your life and socializing and doing some things that really, kind of get you out there. And if you want to have a glass of wine, have a half a glass of wine. If you want to have the gluten cookie and you know that maybe it's not going to be the best of the best for you the next day, but you really want it, to prevent yourself from doing that is sometimes more problematic than just allowing yourself. And it's not necessarily a cheat day. It's just like sometimes it's okay to not be perfect because we're not perfect.
Yeah, of course.
But if I have a heart biomarker that shows up really negatively, that's going to make me not want to do that cookie.
But talking about balance, I'm like, should you have the glass of wine? Should you just have the cookie? We want to live our lives. That's it's so important to remember. Like, joy is a nutrient. We want to live our lives. And depending on what health stage you're at, you have to know your non-negotiables. And be firm with those, the ones that you know that are going to negatively impact you, the ones that you know your body can't tolerate for now. Those change with every season of health and every season of life. And be flexible with the rest. For me, gluten is an absolute non-negotiable. I will never eat it. And it doesn't matter what situation I'm in. Well, if I'm in Italy, you know, never mind. But if I'm in the United States, for me, it's a hard no. It will never happen. Wine and alcohol, for me, is a sometimes. So if I'm somewhere that like, I'm like, you know what? Like we went up to this beautiful dinner and I was like, I would love to split a bottle of wine. That sounds fantastic.
That's right.
Didn't think twice about it. But
it's not every day, and it's not even every week.
And you know your non-negotiables. That way you can have more flexibility and fun with life. And if you're doing certain things to work on your health, your non-negotiables will change. But having that, it takes the guesswork out of it a little bit.
That's right. And I do think it's important. The reason we're finishing this up and doing this is so every day, if you, and this is part of, again, Western medicine doesn't look at this, but every day to factor in a little bit of work, a little bit of play, a little bit of working out, a little bit of like these nutrients that we need in life. So we're going to go and we're going to go see a personal trainer upstairs. He's great. And it's going to hurt in a good way.
Can't wait.
And we can't wait. And it will be so fun. So next week, we're going to do another
we'll be back for Couch Conversations. Episode 3.
Dalton.
Oh, the Dalton the dog.
Yeah.
He's a happy dog. Well, we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.